we're off today on gym class for June 9th, 2010. And today's topic, how to communicate so people really listen. You know, effective communication is really the key to any business and success, and especially in financial services. Let's face it, when you're selling an intangible especially, all you really have is your ability to communicate. So we want to find ways to do that most effectively. And whether you're in leadership or in sales, I think there's some real key tips and some tricks that make all the difference. If you follow them, then you'll make a difference in your business and your personal life immediately. You really can, and that is regardless of what exactly you do. Now, the first step on this process really, I think, is this issue around language. The most common problem we have with communication is the words, oddly enough, that we choose to use. You know, we picked up this problem in grade school, of all places. You know, as we were educated, we were taught to use more and more complex words and sentence structure. My daughter Abigail in grade 2 now, you know, you kind of get measured by the way in which you're able to complicate the language. You know, multi-syllable words, long compound sentences, and impossibly complicated paragraph structure. All of these things were supposed to prove that we were actually making progress. I don't think we were. I'm really sure we were not. You see, the more complicated the language you use, and the more educated, the more complicated the language you use, the more complicated, or more educated rather, the person using it. That was the story. Complicated language, educated person. You know, and that might all be all right, I suppose, if everyone were to be at the same level. And, you know, but as it turns out, really, when language is easier to understand, we don't have to work so hard to understand it. Then we pick it up quickly, can form an opinion, and even take action. So it's not about complicated, and I've said this many times before. You know, the real expert, the person who knows what they're doing, the really educated person takes the complicated story and makes it simple enough that anyone can understand. And by the way, before I get too far with this idea, I must make it clear that this is not a language-specific concept. I'm not just talking here about English. I'm just not talking about only English. I mean any language you may speak, whether it's French, English, any other language, of course, and the more simple language you can use, the more effective you can be. You see, the trouble with complicated language is that it sounds, well, stilted and exclusionary. It's like if you understand the club, if you've joined the club, rather, if you're in the club, I guess, then what you've proved, then you will understand. But communication isn't about just people that are in the club. God knows if you're a financial advisor and you're speaking about a topic like this, well, look, we're talking to people who aren't financial advisors, people who aren't in the club. And so you want to make sure that your material can communicate, can connect with the people that don't know the topic that you're working with. Now, you know, when you use complicated language, you keep people out of the conversations and you don't connect with them. Now let's look at this. Doctors have been doing this for many, many years. You know, when they've got some sort of sad prognosis and they're telling it to a nurse or to an assistant, you know, they'll say it in God knows what kind of language, so that you don't know what they're talking about, and so that, of course, you don't get excited and just make things worse. But this is not about being a doctor, and frankly, good doctors have figured this out too. I can tell you, you know this from your own personal experience with a physician. The great doctors are the ones that say, don't give me all, I mean, you know, you say to them, don't give me the complicated stuff, doc, just tell me what's really going on. And when you can understand that, then you can have this issue around being able to take action, being able to help yourself, help them, help you. That's what you want. So, you know, if you just talk like a doctor speaks, you know, in the old story, and my apologies to doctors who don't do this, and I know there are many, but, you know, you might understand the words, you just don't get what they mean when they are saying these things. And, you know, goodness knows, in our business, and in any business, that's very important. And if you don't understand what's going on, of course, then the clients, the people, the patients you work with, they'll hardly ever tell you. I hear this from my mother all the time. Went for a checkup. What did they say? I don't know. How are you doing? I'm not sure. Because you don't really know. And some people just sort of fold up their tent and go home. You know, a lot of folks might just nod along in approval until they get to a decision point, and then, you know, just decline. You'll be stumped and stymied, and you know what? They might even say something like, well, we'll have to think about this, and then for sure you're dead in the water. when people are thinking like that, nothing really ever gets accomplished. I know I've told this story many times before, but I remember being in New York once and having a guy, as I was saying things just like this, the guy's kind of shaking his head, and I said, "What's up?" He said, "Had exactly this thing happen to me in an interview. And rather, I was referred to an attorney and a CPA, in the outskirts of New York, and it was a great spot and great prospective clients. I went there and I gave them my best stuff. I was so excited. I gave them 90 minutes of my best material because I had a real high-end group in front of me. And so I went on for 90 minutes. He said, and they kept going, for 90 minutes. At the end of that, I said, "So, shall we move forward?" And they go, He said, "What do you mean, You've been saying, for an hour and a half. How come, now?" And the guy said to him, "And this will hardly ever happen to you." The guy said, "Truthfully, we haven't had the foggiest notion what you've been talking about for the last hour and a half, but we thought if we said, long enough, eventually you would go home."